Marini, I expected Marini to be slightly better than he is now. He's obviously going to be safe because of his brother. I'm sure you'll want to get onto that subject in a minute, Harry.
Well, yeah, lovely segue. But I just want to pick up on what you've said about Rins and Mir, actually, because you say that about Rins, but you look at the results and you look at the standings. Rins is ahead of Mir and has consistently scored better this year.
I think as a team manager, though, you've got to look at potential. I mean, it was back in the old day of the Andreas, wasn't it? The two at Ducati, Andrea Dovizioso and that crazy Joe, as was. Who would you pick out of the two Andreas back then? It looked like Iannone had got the place, until he wiped everybody out at Argentina. If you remember, he took himself and Dovi out at the final set of corners at the end of the race and cost Ducati dearly. And he committed a couple of faux pas up to then, so that was kind of like the straw that broke the Ducati back. But it was, who did you go for? Back in the day, I think I'd have gone for Iannone. He looked like he'd got more potential to develop into an even faster motorcycle racer than he was than Dovi. Dovi was that steady, linear kind of, improvement. As the bike improved, he improved with it and rode brilliantly, but it was almost too calculating, too smooth for motorcycle racing. You almost wanted to put the wild card, the nutcase in there, and I think that still is a kind of a problem for team managers. Where's the development coming from? What's the rider that has the greater headroom? Where can we find that extra bit? They're all pretty good, obviously, but where do we find a rider that's got that extra potential to develop that little tiny step further into that consistent race winning rider? And that is a really big challenge nowadays for team management. You've obviously got all the other managers, the personal managers, running around behind the sheds, running around behind the motorhomes, all trying to do deals everywhere, move their chess pieces on the MotoGP board. But it's down to the teams at the end of the day to make the right signings. And I mean, I think this year that there've been one or two that probably didn't quite make the signings that you might have expected them to, and they'll be looking hard inwardly at that. What have we done wrong here? Why has this not happened?
No racing this weekend, of course. But before we wrap things up, Pete, there is testing going on currently as we speak. So I think there's just sort of had the morning session now. So what are we expecting from this Jerez test? We've got obviously coverage of it on Crash.
Yeah, so it's one of the rare in-season tests or any tests that they get now. So it's a big chance for track time. As Keith was saying, after a Grand Prix weekend, the last thing some of the riders want is to then go out and do a full day of riding, and they'll probably do 2, 3, sometimes 4 Grand Prix distances over the course of today because they need every single lap they can get. The weather looks to be fine. In the morning session, Pol Espargaro was quick, Quartararo was quick, but with testing, what you tend to see is that they use their standard bikes, let's say, to set a run, set a lap time, get some data, and then they try new stuff later. So they've got something to compare it with. So really, it's the lap times that will come in probably midday, mid-afternoon, that will be the important ones. Also because that's when the track will have lower grip. But as always with testing, there's a lot of rubber on the track, which means that sometimes things that work, let's say today, might not work when they get to Le Mans. That's always the tricky bit. But a really important day for people like Honda that are still sort of searching for a direction with their new bike.
It's very important as well that a test at Jerez has not got any more than a day in between it, because what happens at Jerez, the track changes to such a huge degree that the data is different. You test there at the beginning of the year when it's cool and you're putting in some magnificent lap times, and you get there now and the track's warm and you're all over the ocky. So to do a back-to-back is really, really valuable from an engineer's point of view, and they just got to knuckle down and do it, the riders. They don't want to be doing it, believe me. Like you say, to do that kind of distance the day after they're already, blister-ridden and tired, but they've got to do it because that back-to-back test is probably one of the most valuable of the year, where they can test stuff when it's all just fresh and hot from the day before. You mentioned Pol Espargaro. Winding back a bit to this podcast about people that might get the sack and might go somewhere else. Now, I would say if he continues in the way he's going, now there's a candidate for what's going to happen to Pol. At the beginning of the year, I'm pretty sure he was my hot tip for doing great things on that Honda. I thought that he would rise to the challenge. He's quite a tough rider, quite an aggressive rider. I thought it might suit the Honda, his style, but it's just fell apart. Now, there's a man that's got to get his head back in order. His brother's running away on an Aprilia. He's on what should be one of the best bikes on the track, and he's struggling like mad with it at the moment. So Aleix Espargaro is one to watch over the next few Grand Prix, that's for sure.
I think we'll have to do an in-depth look perhaps in the summer break, sort of looking at who's hot, who's not, who's going to get the sack, and who's not. It might be a nice one. Let us know as well in the comments if you've got any burning desires for us to talk about, any